Okay. Hi, everybody.
Are we doing this?
We're doing this today. Okay. Thank you. That was a little surreal. Okay, so on behalf of nerds everywhere, I'd want to welcome you to our very first NerdX. And we're going to get started. Okay, today I'm here to talk to you about how we can create innovation. But first I want to start with a story. In 1928, there was a gentleman by the name of Baron Lord Thompson. And Baron Lord Thompson was given a seemingly insurmountable problem. He was the Air Minister for the British Empire, and he was responsible for figuring out a pretty severe problem for the British. They needed to figure out how to get an airship across the transcontinental ocean. This was a big problem for the British. They were getting killed in the international, the reputation. Everybody else had big giant airships, except for the poor British who couldn't get one up and keep it up. And so Lord Thompson was given this challenge. You need to get a plane, one of these giant airships, across the ocean. And so Thompson came up with a plan. He decided to build two teams, one on either side of the ocean, each racing towards the same goal. He formed these teams with his best engineering minds on each of the teams. He gave each of the teams a similar budget, and they each had the same timeline. Get across the ocean, the best team wins. And so as time passed, the teams were working feverishly, and as you might not be surprised to hear, when push came to shove, both teams were way over budget and way past time. But finally the day came, and the first team, called the R-100, launched their airship. It wasn't pretty, but it made it all the way across the ocean and landed safely. But the second ship, the R-101, was not as successful. Within minutes of the R-101 taking off, it crashed into the ground, instantly burst into flames, killing all 46 of the 58 people, including Thompson and his top-notch engineering team. As you can imagine, this was a tragedy for the British Empire. This was their big chance to show the world that they could compete on the international stage, and they had failed. And the loss of life, of course, really bungled that. There were inquiries, as you can imagine. It was the biggest tragedy for the British Empire since the Titanic had hit the bottom of the ocean. And everyone said, what had gone wrong? We dumped all this money, all this time. What was our mistake? Well, ultimately, historians and all these inquiries discovered the same thing. The biggest problem that Thompson had put on his teams was he made it a competition. And instead of these teams working together collaboratively across to learn from each other, instead of them being able to share the resources that each team had, they were competing. In fact, one of the things that they found was ultimately the moment of death for the R-101 was because of the competition. They saw the other team somewhat successfully get a dirigible across the ocean, and they had no other choice but to say, yes, we're ready too, even though they weren't. Okay, so this is lovely. And you say, okay, Camille, why did you bring us here today to talk about dirigibles? Because we, of course, are not building dirigibles in our environment. But here's the thing I want all of us to be thinking about today. I love this quote by Einstein. He says, we can't solve our problems using the same kind of thinking we used when we created them. So one of the things I came here to talk to you about today is, can we systematize innovation? And one of the things I'm going to do is show you a set of tools that will allow us to systematize innovation. But there is a cautionary tale, which is why I wanted to start with our friend Thomson and his dirigible designers crashing into a field in France. And the key here is there is no set of tools or processes that we can use that if we are not collaborating will get us anywhere. One of my favorite quotes is that innovation moves at the speed of collaboration. This is actually something I kind of stole from a Covey book that's called The Speed of Trust, that talks about if we as teams cannot be our most raw, our most creative, our most willing to fail and make mistakes around our team members, we are not actually capable of innovation, because innovation requires edge thinking, it requires vulnerability, it requires a willingness to make mistakes and learn from those mistakes and be inspired by others' mistakes and to be inspired by the power of helping others to find new paths and new ways to do things. So I want to introduce you to a concept of this, called design thinking. You might have run into this in places in your career previously, and if not, I hope it makes you as happy as it makes me. So design thinking has been called by MIT a tool to systematize innovation. Currently, design thinking is taught by every Ivy League college as the most repeatable way to create an innovative culture. But what does that mean? Is it about design itself? Is this about everybody in the organization needs to be a designer, or God forbid we don't even need designers because now our engineers can be designers? And no, that is not the point at all. One of the powers of design across the ages is when people are looking at new ways to solve the same problem that's existed in the past, and looking at how can I bring, like we talked about, that inside spark inside of me and share it and bring it into the world. So I generally don't like to read from slides, but here's some things to know about design thinking. When we are in the process of utilizing design thinking, we are trying to understand the human needs of the people involved. We're trying to look at the problems from a user-centric mindset and not from a business-centric mindset or from a process-centric mindset. We're trying to reframe every problem, not as a technology problem, not as a process problem, but as a people problem, and bring the most human part of ourselves to that problem to solve it. And we want to try and adopt a hands-on approach to prototyping and learning. Lastly, we want to drive continuous discovery and iteration as keys for those tools for innovation. Now, what does this have to do with teamwork? Well, the thing is this isn't a job that a product manager should do. It isn't a job that a designer should do. This is a job that a team should do. Because you don't want to have a product manager coming and saying, oh, I figured out the problem and I figured out the solution. Here you go. I don't know if you guys have worked in that environment. I have, where somebody else thinks they already came up with the solution, and now it's just my job to go and make it happen. I don't want to do that, because you know what? Just like all of you guys, I have genius ideas. There may not be the right ideas, but they're very good ideas. And if I'm sitting in a group of people who trust me to bring an idea, who trust me to bring an idea and feel safe in sharing it, and who trust me enough to give me critical feedback of that idea and know that I won't get my feelings hurt, because it's not about the idea. It's about the collaboration and leveraging each of our beautiful, God-given inspiration to collaborate to build wonderful things. So design thinking is made up of 5 key phases. There was a slide that had them a moment ago, but I want to talk about each one of them because I think they are critical. And I hope that we are in the process of building a culture where each one of you can be involved in these portions of this process as we're building technology for people. The first one is empathize. Why do we care about empathizing with our users? Because we want to develop this knowledge and understanding about what our users do, what they say, what they think, what they feel. But most importantly, we want to put ourselves into their shoes, because otherwise we will rush to a solution that will not solve their problem. If we haven't taken the time to deeply understand what it is, I don't know if you've ever been in a conversation with your spouse, for those of you who are married. They say, oh, I'm having this problem, and you're like, I got a solution. Here, let me tell you. And they say, well, wait a minute. You didn't even listen to the rest of my story. We have a natural inclination as humans to want to problem solve, especially for each other, because gosh, it is so easy to think up solutions for other people's problems because we don't have to deeply understand what's causing those. It's easy for us to jump into the solution. So empathize forces us to spend a little more time, maybe a lot more time, deeply understanding that problem. The next thing we want to do is define it. We've got to combine any research, the conversations that we've had with people, and we have to bring them together to observe where our user problem exists. See, at this point, we're still not jumping to the solution. We're still not in that conversation with our spouse where we're saying, oh, I don't even need to listen to the rest of your story. I figured it out for you. We're still trying to understand. This is actually my favorite part of the whole thing. This is where we ideate. And this is where I think collaboration becomes the most important. Now, yeah, one person can go and start thinking up ideas. And if one person has sat down and understood the problem, they're probably the only person who can come up with ideas. But bringing that collaboration back, when you sit down with a team of people who have spent the time to carefully understand the problem, and now you're thinking up as many crazy ideas for how we might solve that problem as possible, you will not believe the power of the people around you to come up with things that you would never, ever think of. And part of this, when it comes to ideate, is difference of perspective. I personally am a huge advocate of how can we build diversity into our teams. But it's not necessarily for social good, even though I believe in those things. It's because of this. Because true problem solving happens at the edge of radical differences. At the point when the part of us that is not the same says, hey, did you think about that? And you think, no, why would I think about that? The next step is prototyping. And one of the key things that's important to design thinking is eliminate assumptions as a primary driver of success. So many organizations run on the idea of that assumption. And again, bringing our spouses back into it, it's just like that jumping to the idea. Your spouse is going to push back, but our customers won't. They are at our whims to force upon them ideas that may not solve their problems at all. And so this step is designed to get us to test things as quickly as possible in the most simple way as possible. And when we're talking about radical design thinking, these could be paper prototypes used with 3 or 4 people to make sure that what we're trying to work on actually makes sense for our users. So we build real things that people can interact with and play with, and that we can observe those people interacting and playing with and see, did we nail things? Or maybe at this point we realize we still haven't actually understood the problem. As we watch them interacting with our hypothesis of how we might solve the problem, we start to learn from them their better understanding of the problem that we might not have completely understood. Now, of course, we are testing these prototypes, we're working within these prototypes, and we're learning. I think I got a little bit ahead of myself. So now, of course, you can build all day, but if it doesn't make it to market, it didn't make any difference. And the next step after we go through the design thinking process is to implement and make sure our solutions actually get to where people not just our testers, but real people can start to utilize and play with these solutions. Okay, so in closing, while design thinking is a set of tools that can allow a team to innovate much quicker, it's all for naught unless we do it together. If we are in competition with each other, if we are siloed across the organization, if we treat conversations as handoffs and things that we need to cover our own butts instead of ways that we are working together to solve problems together, we will be like Thomson. We will be the dirigible crashing into the field inside of France and flaming up, instead of being on the edge of innovation where we can leverage these tools to solve real problems for our customers. I'm a minute short, but there you go. Thanks for coming to my NED talk.
Can you do a dance for a minute? Thank you, Cameo. We really appreciate you.